guys, it's me Bridget and I'm back with another video. Hey. I keep looking at the home button thinking it's the camera, but it's not. The camera's flipped today. Sorry about that. Anyways, today's part 2 of Women Who Run with Wolves. We are diving into the dissection of the chapter today. Yeah, let's get into it. Okay, so yesterday we talked about the sealskin and the soulskin. We talked about the seal woman who had her sealskin stolen from her by a lonely hunter who she married and had a child with, who turned out to be the spirit child. And the returning of her soul skin to her and the returning of the spirit child to the world. In the next parts, we'll be dissecting the story and discussing it and talking about how it relates to our lives. So the first event that we'll talk about in the story is the losing of one's pelt. Many of the stories that we've talked about in the book thus far have talked about the lesson of what to do when coming out of capture. In Sealskin, Soulskin, we actually talk about the story in reverse. What to do when one is free and then has been captured and then coming out of that capture. The seal woman in the beginning of the chapter traveling above water to dance on the rocks is representative of the mysterious nature of a woman's wild psyche. This part of our psyche is mysterious, wild, and mystical, but it also can thrive above water in the mundane world as a civil being in culture. In the book, Estes talks about what the pelt itself actually means to the woman and its representation in our psyche. The pelt in this story is not so much an article as the representation of a feeling state and a state of being, one that is cohesive, soulful, and of the wildish female nature. When a woman is in this state, she feels entirely in and of herself instead of out of herself and wondering if she is doing right, acting right, or thinking well. Though this state of being in oneself is one she occasionally loses touch with, the time she has previously spent there sustains her while she is about her work in the world. The return to this wildish state periodically is what replenishes her psychic reserves for her projects, family, relationships, and creative life in the topside world. Eventually, every woman who stays away from her soul home for too long tires. This is as it should be. Then she seeks her skin again in order to revive her sense of self and soul, in order to restore her deep-eyed and oceanic knowing. This great cycle of going and returning is reflexive within the instinctual nature of women, and it is innate to all women for all their lives, from throughout girlhood, adolescence, and young adulthood, through being a lover, through motherhood, through being a craftswoman, a wisdom holder, an elder woman, and beyond. These phases are not necessarily chronological, for mid-aged women are often newborn, old women are intense lovers, little girls know a good deal about cronish enchantment. Over and over we lose this sense of feeling that we are wholly in our skins by means already named as well as through the extended duress. Those who toil too long without respite are also at risk. The soul skin vanishes while we fail to pay attention to what we are really doing, and particularly its cost to us. So with all of this metaphor, what really is the sealskin? What are we actually losing and what are we gaining? How do we prevent this stealing or losing of it? In the book, Estes says, we lose the sealskin by becoming too involved with ego, by being too exacting, perfectionistic, or unnecessarily martyred, or driven by a blind ambition, or by being dissatisfied about self, family, community, culture, world, and not saying or doing anything about it, or by pretending that we are an unending source for others and not by doing all we can to help ourselves. Oh, there are as many ways to lose the sealskin as there are women in the world. The only way to hold on to this essential soul skin is to retain an exquisitely pristine consciousness about its value and uses. But, since no one can consistently maintain acute consciousness, no one can keep the soul skin absolutely every day and night. But we can keep the theft of it to a bare minimum. We can develop that shrewd eye that watches the conditions all around and guards our psychic territory accordingly. The Sealskin Soulskin story, however, is about an instance of what we might call an aggravated theft. This big theft can, with consciousness, be mediated in the future if we will pay attention to our cycles and the call to take leave and return home. I think the biggest issue with today's version of self-care and self-love and the mantra that you see on social media is that it's overly romanticized and seen as this black and white thing that can't be changed. It portrays depression and anxiety as something that you can quickly take a pill and fix and it just disappears, or freaking social anxiety as something you can put a face mask on and then all of a sudden you never feel it again. I believe that actually depression, anxiety, even maybe like OCD tics, like a lot of the things that through science we've put a name to and called a disability or called a disorder or called something that's against us and harms us is actually not at all that. I believe personally that, at least for me, my own depression, my own anxiety is actually signals and alarms that my soul and my wildish self gives me in order to recognize what's going on in my life. May sound a little bit crazy, but think about this. If you're a highly sensitive person and you deal with these emotional triggers, a lot of people are able to ignore them and move past them. A lot of people are unable to see them. But if you've ever recognized that when you're going through a time when you're triggered in whatever way, when you feel anxious or you feel depressed, but you choose to maybe tune in with those emotions and work with yourself to figure out ways to come out of them, like logistic ways in your life to not feel that way anymore, it's not like those feelings just last forever and permeate through. At least personally for me, this is my own personal experience. It may be different for you. But personally, for example, I get anxiety a lot, like all the time, like over many different things, and it's taken me a long time to recognize the different things that give me anxiety and my triggers. Now I've recognized that a lot of times I get anxiety over being around certain people that are giving off a negative like vibe, like they're not feeling the situation, they're not being invested in the situation, and then I feel the need to help them change their emotional state about things. Also, I get anxiety over my own like laziness, my own lack of being on top of my work and being on top of the things that I want to do in the future. I also get anxiety over when I am being on top of those things and then stressing out over the fact that those things don't come fast enough to me. My rewards for the work that I put in doesn't come fast enough to me, so then I get anxiety over that. There's so many different things that trigger my anxiety in my head, but what I'm realizing is anxiety is not something that I just want to like make go away. It's something that I want to recognize that like, oh, I'm getting anxiety over this reason. I need to change my thought process about it, and then it will go away on its own, you know? But the point is, whether I'm feeling this anxiety or the depression, the key is to take a moment to look into myself and to figure out what's going on with me. Usually I need to take a break from people and just work with myself in my own head. But this is not the same as taking a vacation. This is me going home. And Estes very much so makes it very clear that there's a difference between taking a vacation and going home. She says in the book, we traditionally compensate for loss of a more serene habitat by taking a vacation or a holiday, which is supposed to be the giving of pleasure to oneself. Except a vacation is often anything but. We can compensate our workday dissonance by cutting down on things we do that cause us to tense our deltoids and trapezii into painful knots. And all this is very good. But for the soul self psyche, vacation is not the same as refuge. Time out or time off is not the same as returning home. Calmness is not the same as solitude. Oftentimes we see women go through the losing of their pelt in many different ways throughout society, and while a face mask may give them a break from the loss of their pelt, while it may give them a moment to relax, the real work is in them taking time away from what has stolen their pelt in the first place, giving themselves a chance to come back to their younger self, to speak to their soul, allow that voice to speak through their hearts, and then following the guide of their inner wildish soul. They can't do that just in the time it may take to listen to a 3-minute R&B song and put a face mask on their face. It takes more work than that. And maybe they can even do it in less time than that, but it's a conscious actual work, not just doing an action that is required here. Sometimes it's really hard as women to recognize when a stealing of our pelt is even occurring because of our roles in society and how we believe we're supposed to be. In today's society, we talk a lot about toxicity and toxic people and toxic behavior, but what we have to recognize is that it's not always going to feel or present itself as toxic when a theft is occurring. It's also not about whether things are right or wrong that decides the soul's health. The issue is the cost and the fit, the give and the take that determines whether or not a soul is able to be healthy. To explain that further, Esty says in the book, though we see that the skin can be lost through a devastating and wrong love, it may also be lost in a right and deep love. It is not exactly the rightness of a person or thing or its wrongness that causes the theft of our soul skins. It is the cost of these things to us. It is what it costs in time, energy, observation, attention, hovering, prompting, instructing, teaching, and training. These motions of psyche are like cash withdrawals from the psychic savings account. The issue is not about the energetic cash withdrawals themselves, for these are an important part of life's give and take, but it is being overdrawn that causes the loss of the skin and the impaling and dulling of one's acute instincts. It is the lack of further deposits of energy, knowledge, acknowledgement, ideas, and excitement that causes a woman to feel that she is psychically dying. In the story, when the young seal woman loses her pelt, she is involved in a beautiful pursuit in the business of freedom. She dances and dances and does not pay attention to what is going on around her. When we are in our rightful wildish nature, we all feel this bright life. It is one of the signs that we are close to the wild woman. We all enter the world in a dancing condition. We always begin with our pelts intact. Yet, at least until we become more conscious, we all go through this stage of individuation. We all swim up on the rock, dance, and don't pay attention. It is then that the more tricksterish aspect of the psyche descends, and somewhere down the road we suddenly look for and can no longer find what belongs to us or to what we belong to. Then our sense of soul is mysteriously missing, and the more so it is hidden away. And so we wander about partially dazed. It is not good to make choices when dazed, but we do. The importance of the seal woman's story is to see from the perspective of a woman coming from abundance, a place of free and wild expression, to see her naivete and how it leads to her capture, but also how she is able to come out of it and restore her soul skin. She was not in a deprived state when she was captured. In fact, she was in a luxury and abundant, full state of bliss when she was captured. In that state, she was blinded and dazzled, which led her to making decisions which led to her capture. This is the story of one who is given all that they need, but loses it before they realize their worth. In the book, Esty says, the sealskin is a symbol of soul that not only provides warmth, but also provides an early warning system through its vision as well. In hunting cultures, the pelt is equal to food as the most important product for survival. It is used to make boots, to line parkas, for waterproofing, to keep ice horror away from the face and wrists. The pelt keeps the little children safe and dry, protects and warms the vulnerable human belly, back, feet, hands, and head. To lose the pelt is to lose one's protection, one's warmth, one's early warning system, one's instinctive sight. Psychologically, to be without the pelt causes a woman to pursue what she thinks she should do rather than what she truly wishes. It causes her to follow whoever and whatever impresses her as strongest, whether that is good for her or not. Then there's much leaping and little looking. She is jocular instead of incisive, laughs things off, puts things off. She pulls back from the taking of the next step, from making the necessary descent and holding herself there long enough for something to happen. So, you can see that in a world that values driven women who go, 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 the stealing of soulskins is very easy. So much so that the first theft occurs somewhere between the ages of 7 and 18. By then, most young women have begun to dance on the rock in the sea. By then, most will have reached for their soulskin but not found it where they left it. And though this initially seems meant to cause the development of a medial structure in the psyche, that is, an ability to learn to live in the world of spirit and the outer reality as well, too often this progression is not accomplished, nor is any of the rest of the initiatory experience, and the woman wanders through life skinless. The losing of the pelt itself is an essential experience to understanding the value of one's wildish soul life. The fear with experiencing this is that one will lose it before one realizes the value of their wildish life in the first place, and then one may run so long that it is hard to come back. This step should be an initiatory experience, an experience that integrates one with the rest of society, that teaches one the strength of their spirit and their soul, and if done right, that should be the conclusion of the story. And it's never too late with the wildish woman until you're dead. So if you feel that you have gone through this stealing and you've never been able to come through the other side, recognize that there's still hope. So since we've talked about the sealskin as the soul, we'll now talk about the lonely man as the ego, and then finally the spirit child as, can you guess it? The spirit. So the lonely man. In the story, the lonely man represents the ego, as I've said before. The ego is the logical, hardworking, stubborn, and sturdy inhabitator of the psyche, which often rules the direction of life from a very early age. We are run by the desires and beliefs of the ego, often from a very early age in life, relegated to its structures and determinations of status and worth. We learn from an early age who's pretty, we learn from an early age what success means, what financial success means, who has money, who's rich, that being rich is a good thing, that having good food is fun, that some food is better than other food, some people's houses are better than other people's houses, some people's cars are better than other people's cars. All of those things, all of those determinations are all determined by our ego. And they're all determined from a very early age. However, also from the beginning, the ego is always fascinated by the soul. Even though it is in charge, it is always fascinated by the mystery and the magnificence of the soul. We are always fascinated by those people who are happy even though they have nothing. We are always fascinated by that factor of just confidence and cool, even though maybe they don't compare to what our ego says should be the reason that they have that confidence and cool air about them. We're fascinated by those things from the beginning of life, although we may not understand them. The ego wishes to give over control to the soul, actually, but it has too much of a control freak nature to do so. It wants too much control in order to just freely give over control to the soul. This controlative nature is actually a weakness, and it expresses this weakness by taking little steals of soul time, by allowing little special moments of confidence in a child even though they didn't necessarily do the best thing in the whole world, that they don't have $1 million, whatever. You know, like those little moments the soul comes through and peeks through, the ego allows because of its fascination with the ego and the desire to give over control to the ego in general. But it takes back over because it has too much weakness and it can't handle it. To understand the ego, we must understand its role. In the book, Estes says, in the beginning of one's life, the ego is curious about the soul world, but more often it is concerned with the fulfilling of its hungers. The ego is initially born into us as potential, and it is shaped, developed, and filled up with ideas, values, and duties by the world around us, our parents, our teachers, our culture. And this is as it should be, for it becomes our escort, our armor, and our scout into the outer world. However, if the wildish nature is not allowed to emanate upward through the ego, giving it color, juice, and instinctive responsiveness, then although the culture may approve of what has been fashioned in this ego, the soul does not, and cannot, will not approve of incompleteness of its work. It's not that the ego is necessarily wrong. The ego has never been wrong, and the ego running the whole show for a moment is not wrong either. It's the ego being solely in charge and destroying the soul completely that's a problem. I came up with this analogy. Let me know if you guys understand what I'm saying. The ego is kind of like Velma from Scooby-Doo. She's very sturdy, she's very intellectual, she knows the facts and can solve the mysteries in her head. But without the gang, without Daphne and Fred and their naive bravery, without Scooby and Shaggy and their dumb luck, the mystery would never get solved because the bad guys would always be one step ahead. Velma needs the whole gang in order to figure it out, just like the ego needs the whole gang in order to figure it out. You know what I'm saying? Let me know if you guys enjoyed that analogy in the comments, please. Why steal the Soulskin? Why does the ego want to steal the soul, and what would the ego want to do with the soul in the first place? In the book, Esty says, the lonely man in the tale is attempting to participate in the life of the soul. But like the ego, he is not particularly built for it, and he tries to grab at the soul skin rather than develop a relationship with it. Why does the ego steal the soul skin? Like all other lonely or hungry things, it loves the light. It sees light and the possibility of being close to the soul, and it creeps up to it and steals one of its essential camouflages. Ego cannot help itself. It is what it is, attracted to the light. Even though it cannot live under the water, it has its own yearning for relationship with the soul. The ego is crude in comparison to the soul. Its way of doing things is usually not evocative or sensitive, but it has a tiny and dimly understood longing for the beautiful light. And this, in some way, and for some time, calms the ego. So, in a hunger for soul, our own ego self steals the pelt. Stay with me, whispers the ego. I will make you happy. By isolating you from your soul self and your cycles of returning to your soul home, I will make you very, very happy. Please, please stay. And so, as it is right in the beginning of the feminine individuation, the soul is pressured into relationship with ego. The mundane function of the soul's subservience to the ego occurs in order for us to learn the world, the ways to gain things, how to work, how to differentiate good from not so good, when to move, when to stay put, how to live with other people, learning the mechanics of the culture, holding a job, holding a baby, taking care of the body, taking care of business, all things of the outer life. The initial purpose of developing such an important construct within a woman's psyche, the marriage of the seal woman and the lonely man, a marriage in which she is definitely subservient, is to create a temporary arrangement that will ultimately produce a spirit child who can cohabit and translate in and between both the mundane and the wildish worlds. Once this symbolic child is born, developed, initiated, and resurfaces into the outer world, and the relationship with soul is healed. Even though the lonely man, the ego, cannot dominate forever, for someday it will have to submit to the demands of soul for the rest of a woman's life. By living with the seal woman, soul woman, it has been touched by greatness. It is therefore gratified, enriched, and humbled all at the same time. The marriage of the soul and the ego is not wrong. In fact, it's necessary. It creates the spirit child, and the spirit child cohabits both worlds. Now we will learn about the spirit child, the union between the soul and the ego produced in its child. I've said child like 15 times. In the book, Esty says, the spirit child is the miracle child, who has the ability to hear the call, hear the far-off voice that says it is time to come back to oneself. It is this child who brings the sealskin, soulskin, back to his mother. It is the child who enables her to return to her home. This child is a spiritual power that impels us to continue our important work, to push back, change our lives, better the community, join in helping to balance the world, all by returning to home. If one wants to participate in these things, the difficult marriage between the soul and the ego must be made. The spirit child must be brought to life. Retrieval and return are the goals of mastery. The spirit is the go-between of the soul and the ego, as I've said many times before. Because of the soul, the spirit is able to shatter and break into a million pieces at the sound of the most beautiful horn or a baby's cry. Because of the ego, the spirit is able to affect change in the most traditionalist, stubborn minds of society by simply placing the evidence of hope. So now that we've learned the players of the story, in part 3 we'll talk about the next events of the story, the drying out and crippling of the mother seal, the spirit child hearing the call, and all that happens after that. Stay tuned till next time. I'll see y'all tomorrow. Bye! Woo! Wait, before you go, I'm sure I already asked you guys this, and hopefully you already have, but just in case you haven't, make sure you like and comment on this video and go ahead and share it with your friends too. If you guys enjoyed that video and would like to continue to hang out with me, go ahead and follow my Instagram, yo! I post on there way more often than I do YouTube, and I also respond to my DMs so we could be real friends in like real life, you know? Go ahead and subscribe to my channel, and if you're looking for more stuff to watch, this was my last video and I think you'd really like this video right here, so check it out. I'll be waiting. Go ahead and click whenever you're ready. I'll be waiting. Okay, hopefully you've clicked now. Bye.